I would like to address the first question to you, if I may, and a series of questions will be forthcoming from the members of the audience here. In one of your last books, Hegemony or Survival, you noted that high on the global agenda today is the declared attention of the most powerful state in history to maintain its hegemony through the use of military force. Then you make two interrelated claims, which I would like you to elaborate on, and which I think may be a good starting point for tonight's discussion. The first is that what has been in the making for the last few years or so is a new imperial grand design on the part of the US, labeling the current administration and its policies in the context of a revisionist state. And the second claim you make is that America's imperial intention is a menace even to its own population. Would you elaborate for the audience on those two claims, please?
Well, first I ought to make it clear that there's nothing original about those comments. In fact, in both cases, I'm quoting from the mainstream establishment sources. So the first, what I call there the new imperial grand strategy, that, as is mentioned in a footnote, is borrowed from Foreign Affairs, the major establishment journal, an article by a well-known political analyst, international relations specialist, John Eikenberry, also quite mainstream. And this was an article that Foreign Affairs published within a few weeks after the announcement of the National Security Strategy of September 2002, which they must have rushed into print, an article immediately discussing it and describing it as, Eikenberry describes it as a new imperial grand strategy, which is very dangerous for the world and harmful for the people of the United States as well. And he goes on to discuss this. Actually, it wasn't as new as he indicated. The fact is that there was it followed a long discussion, interaction in Foreign Affairs, the main establishment journal, Journal Council on Foreign Relations, and many others, in which it was brought up repeatedly that the strategy is not totally new, that it has predecessors. And the right answer, I think, was given by Madeleine Albright in an article in the same journal. She was Clinton's Secretary of State, and she pointed out that the strategy is familiar, but it was being presented in a way which is very harmful. He said every president has an option like this, what's called, politely, it's called anticipatory self-defense. Impolitely, it's called aggression, the supreme crime for which people are hanged at Nuremberg. So pick whatever term you like. But that every president, she said, has this in his back pocket, but it is not sensible to present it in a way, in such a brazen, offensive fashion, which alienates even allies, let alone, and also drives potential adversaries to respond, of course they will. So you have to do it in a different style. And she knew what she was talking about, because Clinton's official strategy was even more extreme than Bush's. Clinton's official strategy was that the U.S. presented to Congress, was that the U.S. has the right to use force when it chooses to ensure control of resources and markets that it needs. Well, that's literally taken. That's much more extreme than Bush's strategy, but it didn't arouse any criticism. And the reason was it was presented quietly and politely. It was presented in a review of the, lengthy review of policy that the president gives to Congress, where most people are probably either sleeping or away and the press isn't there and so on. Yeah, but that was the official strategy. So the conclusion, without going into it, is that you can trace it in the same book. In fact, I traced the strategy way back, and it's there. And there is a fairly narrow spectrum of policy making. And it's true that the Bush administration happens to be at a very extreme end of it, the extreme end of the narrow spectrum, and very brazen about it, and furthermore, they implement it. So the announcement of the National Security Strategy in September 2002, which set off these waves of protests, many from right within the establishment, and of course around the world, that was announced at the same time that Bush and Blair virtually announced the invasion of Iraq. Since Bush and Blair, like most leaders, naturally have total contempt for democracy and hate their population, this was kept secret. It was kept secret that they were already bombing Iraq. In fact, some of the major bombing attacks were taking place, as Bush and Blair knew, in September 2002, right at the time when they were making eloquent statements about the need for diplomacy and how we're going to make an all-out effort to try every means we can to avoid war. At that very same time, they were carrying out major bombing attacks to ensure that the forthcoming invasion would have no resistance. But that's the way great powers work. And in this case, it is at the extreme of the narrow spectrum. And the danger goes well beyond. You can read in the major journals of opinion after that book came out, the major respectable journals, Journal of the American Academy of Arts and Sciences, for example, can't get respectable at mainstream, where two leading strategic analysts point out that the what's called the transformation of the military, the military programs being developed and implemented by Rumsfeld's Pentagon, which radically increase offensive military capacity in every dimension. They point out, John Steinbrenner, a well-known strategic analyst, points out that this strategy carries what he calls an appreciable risk of ultimate doom. There's an extreme danger to the United States for obvious reasons. Makes the obvious point, as every strategic analyst knows, that when you extend your offensive military capacity and you openly announce that you're going to attack anyone you feel like, potential targets are not going to say politely, yes, thank you, please cut my throat. So what they're going to do is react. And the way they're going to react is whatever happens to be within their means. If they're weak countries, they'll react by escalating terror, which is a weapon that they can use. If they're powerful countries, they'll develop a nuclear deterrent, as it is claimed Ukraine is now doing. Maybe yes, maybe no, but the consequence of these actions, if they're very powerful states, let's say Russia, they'll do exactly what Russia did as soon as the transformation of the military began. It radically increased its own military spending, developing new missiles, new advanced missiles, new kinds of warheads targeted against the United States. That's a defensive reaction. And it was predictable, and it happened. And furthermore, these Russian systems, like ours, like those of the United States, are on automated control, what's called loosely air trigger alert. It's controlled by computers which try to give an analysis of threats and then determine whether there's an attack on the country. Well, we know how the U.S. system works. U.S. systems give hundreds of false interpretations. The computer systems say, yes, there's a missile attack coming. They analyze something or other. There's a few minutes for human intervention to analyze and determine whether it's real. Luckily, so far, human intervention has always terminated it, but there's no guarantee of that. It could happen tomorrow. The Russian systems are much worse. Since the economy collapsed in the 1990s, it fell by about 50%, seriously deteriorated. The computer systems are much less reliable, which means nuclear attack is much higher. Steinbrenner, in this same essay, expresses the opinion of many of the strategic analysis community, and he says he hopes that a coalition of peace-loving states will form to constrain U.S. aggressive militarism, which is leading directly towards ultimate doom. And he adds that he hopes this coalition will be led by China. So, that's a pretty amazing statement coming from right at the heart of the American establishment, hoping that China will take the lead in forming a coalition of peace-loving states to constrain the United States. Implicitly, he doesn't say it in words, but implicitly he is assuming that American democracy has so deteriorated that the public in the United States can't do anything about it. So therefore we have to hope that China will come along and save us. Well, why do you pick China? Now, the reason is that of all the nuclear powers, major military powers, China has been the most restrained in its military developments, its actions, and its programs. So China, as it points out, has led the world in trying to prevent militarization of space. And that goes back to the Clinton years. Actually, its origins are Reagan's Star Wars, but it was picked up in the Clinton years, an effort to develop programs that will militarize space. And everyone knows that sooner or later that means weaponized space, using space for a means of attack, instant attack, practically instant, few minutes attack, anywhere in the world, with a highly lethal material, the hypersonic planes, launching platforms, laser bombs, whatever, I think nuclear bombs, that could threaten and attack any place on Earth, thanks to very sophisticated global surveillance systems. The commanders in charge of this can know if a truck is moving across the street in Athens. And if they decide, okay, let's attack, they can do it. Well, those systems are extremely dangerous. The whole world has tried to block them. The UN has, the Disarmament Commission has been meeting for years, trying to preserve space for peaceful means. The intent of the Outer Space Treaty of 1967, the U.S. has blocked it, and alone. In the Clinton years, that was true. It's even more extensive today. The Bush programs are moving from what Clinton called control of space to what the Bush programs call ownership of space for military purposes. We own it. And right now, about 95% of global expenditures on space-type weaponry are in the United States. And yes, this is greatly increasing the risk of ultimate doom.